Everyone's ready?
Yep.
Awesome, then I'll begin. In this first negative speech, we're going to see that the affirmative team's plan is not needed because currently we are already exporting LNG to Japan and that they're not reliant on Russia and that Japan doesn't even really want our LNG. So let's get into those points right now. So first of all, we're going to start off with some inherency, which basically means that the affirmative team's plan isn't needed because the problem is already being solved. So let's start off with inherency point 1, already exporting to Japan. Already exporting to Japan. So that's basically what we're going to be talking about in this inherency point, how we're already giving LNG to Japan. So let's start off with subpoint A, Freeport and Sabine Pass. Freeport and Sabine Pass. Bloomberg Business said on May 30th, 2013, quote, on May 17th, the U.S. Department of Energy approved Freeport's application to export liquefied natural gas to countries without free trade agreements with the U.S., which account for about 90% of global gross domestic product. 2 years ago, it approved Cheniere Energy's request to do the same thing at its Sabine Pass LNG project. Freeport's LNG will then be shipped mostly to Japan, whose utilities have contracted for the gas. Sabine Pass will ship LNG to customers based in the UK, Spain, Korea, and India. By the time they're completed, Freeport and Sabine Pass will be able to export 3.6 billion cubic feet of LNG per day, unquote. So as we can see, these two different companies actually got approval to send LNG to Japan. So really, we don't need the affirmative team's plan because companies are already able to export. Let's move on to subpoint B, that of 18% exported by 2020. 18% exported by 2020. Daniel J. Weiss said on April 9th, 2014, quote, before Congress passes legislation to accelerate or eliminate the public interest review process, it is essential to note that DOE has already approved LNG terminals that could export 13 billion cubic feet per day, about 18% of total domestic production projected in 2020. The Energy Information Administration, or EIA, notes that LNG exports will increase by 14-fold between 2013 and 2020 under a business-as-usual scenario. There would be another 4-fold increase in exports between 2020 and 2030, unquote. So as we can see, our exports to Japan are increasing every single day. There's no need to pass the affirmative team's plan because we are already exporting tons of LNG to Japan. So let's move on to our inherency point 2, that of alternative energy. Alternative energy. So basically what we're going to be seeing in this inherency point is that Japan has alternate energy sources that they can use. So let's start off with subpoint A, that of opening third reactor. Opening third reactor. Bloomberg News said on October 25th, 2015, quote, Japan is slowly returning to nuclear power as it balances cutting the costs of relying on imported energy with public opposition to atomic plants. Kyushu Electric Power Company's Sendai number 1 and number 2 units on Japan's southern island of Kyushu are the only reactors to clear the regulator's safety standards, receive local approval, and resume operation under post-Fukushima rules. Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority said in July that the number 3 unit at the Aikata facility met its safety standards. Additional inspections will be required before the unit resumes operation. 2 reactors at Kansai Electric Power Company's Takahama station, about 60 kilometers north of Kyoto, have also received NRA approval, though court challenges have prevented them from restarting. Aikata number 3 may restart as early as March, unquote. So as you can see from this piece of evidence, they're actually trying to increase their nuclear power, and we can see that they're actually working a lot on these different nuclear power plants. So they're opening a third reactor. Let's move on to our subpoint B, that of 2 more reactors operational. 2 more reactors operational. Nuclear Energy Institute said on December 10th, 2015, quote, Kansai Electric Power Company received approval from the town of Takahama on December 3rd for the restart of its Takahama 3 and 4 reactors. A local government official said, Kansai Electric said November 25th that it expects the restart of Takahama 3 and 4 to be delayed to late January and late February 2016 because of a delay in its preparations for final on-site checks by Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority. Unquote. So as we can see, even though that one reactor was delayed for a little bit, it's going to start up in 2016. So really, Japan isn't going to need our LNG. So let's move on to a solvency that's actually directly responding to their subpoint A under their advantage of U.S. economy, where they basically said that Japan really wants our LNG. However, my response to that is slack in demand. Slack in demand. You can actually label this as a solvency point, which basically says that their plan isn't going to solve the problem that they have presented. So let's start off with subpoint A of Japanese importers bailing out. Japanese importers bailing out. Reuters news service said in 2014, quote, "A looming gas glut worldwide is prompting Japanese and Indian firms to resell to European traders and utilities big chunks of U.S. liquefied natural gas they had committed to buy several years ago, signaling tempered enthusiasm for U.S. energy. The chance to ship LNG from the United States, where natural gas output is booming, was touted by the solution to Asia's soaring energy needs and mounting fuel import bill. And firms rushed in to grab a slice of the affordable action. But after splashing out billions of dollars to build numerous plants to liquefy and export the gas by ship, at least 3 buyers, spooked by the scale of their commitments and risks of heavy financial losses, want out, in part," unquote. So as we can see from this piece of evidence, the Japanese importers are actually bailing out, and they don't want our LNG as much as the affirmative team is saying that they are. So even if we were to increase exports to Japan, it actually wouldn't help because Japan doesn't really want our LNG that badly. Let's move on to a response to their advantage about how Russia will be countered, and so they actually won't be relying on Russia that much. However, my response is that of just only 10%. Only 10%. The Maritime Executive said on February 1st, 2015, quote, "About 30% of Japan's LNG imports originate from regional suppliers in Southeast Asia, although the country has a fairly balanced portfolio with supplies coming from other regions. Qatar, the world's largest supplier of LNG, overtook Indonesia and Malaysia to become Japan's second largest supplier, behind Australia since 2012. In 2013, Russian LNG exports constituted 10% of Japan's LNG imports, ranking Russia as Japan's 4th largest supplier," unquote. So as we can see from this piece of evidence, Russia is only supplying Japan with 10% of their LNG. That actually is not very much. Australia and Malaysia and Indonesia all overtook Russia. So as we can see, they really aren't that reliant on Russia. That's the impact, not reliant. Not reliant. They're not reliant on Russia, so we don't have to pass a plan to give them more LNG because they actually don't want it as much as the affirmative team is trying to convince you that they do. And also, we are already exporting as much LNG to Japan as we need to. So it's for all of these reasons that I would urge you to vote for the negative team. Thank you. I now open for cross-examination.
Hey Trinity, I've got a few questions for you.
Sure.
So what countries is Sabine Pass exporting to?
I believe it said it was mostly exporting to Japan.
Okay, can I see that evidence?
Yeah.
And also, what companies were involved in both these projects?
I believe, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it would be Freeport and Sabine Pass, I think.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this evidence was talking about the terminals, right?
Yes, I believe it was.
So it's saying that we're going to have large terminals into the future, correct?
I believe that it was saying we'd have large terminals, which would mean that we would be sending more LNG, yeah.
Okay. And in the evidence that you read about how we're going to be exporting a lot of LNG, this was talking about future projections, right?
It was talking about future projections. Also, right now, it was saying that they're going to be able to increase their LNG exports per day, so, like from now till then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that talking about with current policy, or was it talking about if we continue to move forward with policy?
I believe it was talking about with current policy.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And is that on the page that I handed back?
It may have been. I think so, yes.
Okay. Now, when you're talking about the reactors, so you're familiar with the whole Fukushima disaster, right?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Now, how many reactors did they shut down right after this disaster?
I'm not exactly sure how many they shut down, but as I read with the piece of evidence, they're trying to start them back up.
So starting at 3, so do you know how many nuclear reactors Japan has in total?
I believe that it said in my solvency or something that they're increasing their nuclear power, so I think it said that there were 3 reactors currently
up and
operating.
running.
Up and running, yeah.
Yeah, how many did they have before they shut them all down?
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. Now, before Fukushima, before they shut down these nuclear power plants, how much LNG were they importing?
I also don't know that, yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that because they restarted nuclear power plants to pre-Fukushima levels, that they're not going to need LNG at all?
Well, because they're trying to start up these different operators, I believe that they wouldn't be wanting as much LNG as I think I also
Okay.
read in the slack of demand. Yeah.
Okay, can I see the evidence for slack of demand?
Sure.
Okay, and then out of 4.6 trillion cubic feet of LNG, how much would 10% be?
I'm not entirely sure.
Would you agree it'd be a very large amount?
It would probably be quite a large amount. However, that doesn't mean that Japan is reliant on them, since they're still getting a lot of LNG. They're still
Okay.
getting 90% of their LNG from other places, so
Sure.
they've still got a lot.
Is the potential for that 10% of this trillion, so billions of cubic feet of LNG, is the potential that could be cut off, would that have any economic harms?
It could have some economic harms, but I don't think it would be enough to pass a plan that really isn't needed. Yeah.
Okay, can I see the evidence you read about Russia too?
Sure.
Okay. All right, great. I think those are all my questions.
Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.